Our dream was to drive across America.
Going all the way from California to Maine on board our 35-foot Artland RV.
And we had a mission.
To see the most fabulous art and architecture in the whole country.
This is Mame McCutchin. She wanted to meet artists and curators to explore the cultural heart of the United States.
And this is Charlie Luxton. He's an English designer and he's passionate about our buildings.
Wow. Together we're bringing you the very best of what we saw on the road. This is America.
This is Artland, USA. In this mammoth journey that we've taken across the country, I've been looking at a lot of art.
And I've been looking at bucket loads of amazing architecture. I've seen two of the seminal houses from the 20th century, witnessed the birth and development of the skyscraper in Chicago, and even seen a house made of dirt.
He's been living the dream.
I have. I've been living the dream. In this show, Mame and I are looking back over that dream, recalling the very best of the architecture that we visited. When I was studying architecture, there were a handful of buildings that I knew one day I had to visit. And right at the top of my wish list was the Salk Institute, a short hop in the Artland bus up the coast from San Diego. So it has to be my first point of call. It was designed at the end of the 1950s by one of the greatest American architects, Louis Kahn, and its construction was overseen by my guide, Jack McAllister. So Jack, what was your involvement with the Salk Institute?
Well, I was a student of Lou Kahn's at the University of Pennsylvania in the 50s and then stayed on to work for him and was in charge of this project for Kahn.
So you were the project architect?
Yeah, I was a project architect, right.
That's a big responsibility.
Yes, it was. I was very young, too. I was 23.
Wow.
I was a child.
23? I mean, that's extraordinary.
Kahn's whole office was under 30.
And it was an intense period of work?
Everything with Lou Kahn was intense.
Louis Kahn was commissioned to create a research institute by Jonas Salk, the man who pioneered the polio vaccination. Together they conceived a complex of studies for scientists on two sides of a central piazza, looking out over the ocean. Even on a dull, May-grey morning, I love the pure and precise forms and the very human scale. These are the studies then at the front?
These are the studies, right.
And actually the main bulk of what the building is doing is happening...
Back there, yes.
I never really got that.
Yeah.
I never really understood that relationship.
Well, it's an incredibly simple scheme.
Do you think that the reason the building is so extraordinary and beautiful is the relationship between Kahn and Salk? Was that absolutely key?
Absolutely essential, yes.
Do you think that's why it was the best building he ever did?
Yes.
If you think it was the best building
I think
ever
it's
did.
the best
I think it's the best building.
I think it's the best building he ever did, and I think it was because of a unique partnership that was so symbiotic that they each made the other better. And they bounced off of one another. And every time one climbed to a new plateau, there'd be a hand down and say, come on up here, it's pretty good up here. And so the building got better and better and better, and Jonas was never satisfied. And Lou loved that because he said, well, if we start over, we'll do a better building. One of the things we tried to do on the project was to prefabricate as much as possible. So this whole insert was made in a cabinet shop, a joinery shop, and brought in and just dropped in place. So that it was all built in a factory situation, which made it cheaper because factory labor is about half the price of field labor. So
teak, solid teak.
It's solid teak, it's not plywood.
Beautiful oak paneling.
This lighting was added over my dead body.
You're not happy about the lighting?
No, it's horrible.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice touch, isn't it? And you detailed this?
Yeah.
That is slate.
Yeah, originally we had little teak boxes with chalk in it, and people would write formulas as you come through and see thick scribbles of scientists, which is cute, no?
It's a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
You could leave messages.
You could leave, yeah.
Go on for supper.
Meet me for lunch.
Our filming day is ticking along so well. Suspiciously well. Jack's the perfect guide, and I'm living an architectural dream. And then things start going very wrong. Well, the sun finally came out, and the building is looking absolutely stunning. But other than that, it's been a complete disaster. We've been driven into twice today, and now the £80,000 camera has broken down, so we're using a telephone to record this. If anyone knows what an E361 error is, which is what the camera is telling us, could you please let us know, because we're stuck. So, I don't know what we're going to do now, actually. Things can only get better, and they do. We track down a replacement camera, and just as important, the sun keeps shining. These are the perfect conditions to appreciate the Salk's exquisite geometry. It was really great meeting Jack today, and through him I feel as though I've got to know one of my architectural heroes a bit better, Louis Kahn. But spending time here makes me think that while many people see modern architecture as being some way inhumane, this place disproves that. People love spending time here. They love working here. And if there's one lesson we can learn from Louis and the Salk Institute, is that modern architecture can be about people. It can be places you really want to be. Now, when you're going to be on the road for 8 weeks, you better get to know the architecture of your vehicle. Just this thing's a monster.
It's a house on wheels.
It is a house.
It's bigger than my apartment.
Now, what's
you want to head for the open road?
No.
I'm watching the tail. You're good. It's only going to be trouble in the tight spots, right? When you're in the open road, it's going to be...
Oh, do you want to go now? Mrs. Confidence?
Yeah, sure.
Mrs. Like, this is so easy.
So I don't have to release any brakes or anything, right? We're just ready to go. Oh, I do. Oops, all right. Oh, we're not in drive, are we?
No. Brilliant.
Here we go. Oh my gosh.
This is
Following ahead,
really,
apparently.
really big truck.
I spend my days on 40-foot buses. Not to say that I can drive, but I work on a bus.
You work on a bus?
I'm a tour guide. On your left, you have the Empire State Building, which was built in 1930, was the tallest structure in New York City. See, Charlie isn't the only one who knows about architecture. And as we were traveling, I got to see some amazing buildings too, including one at the foot of the Rockies in Colorado, the chapel at the United States Air Force Academy. When its design was first revealed to the public in the 1950s, it was the subject of enormous controversy, but the chapel has since become a modernist icon. It's an incredible place to visit, but what is it like to live with? So, as a cadet here in the academy, when you first moved in to start school, what did you think of this building?
Actually, my first exposure to the chapel was when I was a child. I visited the academy with my grandmother when I was 12. And that was my first experience with the chapel, with the academy, with seeing the entire place. And my first impression was, wow, it's huge, because I could see it. It was the very first thing that I could see driving up, and I was really excited. And it was just beautiful. And then the second thing I noticed was how different it was from the rest of the architecture. Everything here is square, 90 degrees. It's very, very different from the chapel. It stands out so much. And actually from that visit, I decided I want to come here. I wanted to be a cadet.
This is the #1 man-made tourist attraction in the state of Colorado.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
We've got about 500,000 visitors a year through here, just as visitors. That doesn't include people who attend our worship service, weddings, funerals, memorial services, just as tourists. Walter Netsch was the architect that designed the chapel, and it took him 5 years to design it, and then took 4 years for the actual construction. That started in 1959 and was completed in 1963. And you can see they did a fabulous job of this.
It's just amazing. It's breathtaking. It really is. If people think that maybe it looks like airplanes, and if airplanes are used by the military, and the military is used in wars, and this is a house of worship, do people have a difficult time reconciling those two things together, do you think?
Oh, maybe a small number of people, but this is, after all, an Air Force Academy. So what better thing than to look like airplane wings?
I've noticed some of the detailing here. There's more wings on the inside. Can you show us?
The ends of the pews here represent old airplane propellers. The shape is similar to half a propeller, and they're made of laminated wood, like the old propellers used to be.
Are there some other details in here that are...
Well, the
remnants of
colored
airplanes?
glass in this chapel, there are 24,000 pieces of colored glass, and they go from the darker colors in the back to the lighter colors as you go towards the altar, and that represents coming out of the darkness of the world and into the light of God.
In addition to the main Protestant chapel, there are chapels for both the Jewish and Catholic cadets, and interfaith rooms for all other religions.
Mame, the Catholic chapel, it represents the grottos or the catacombs when the Christians were persecuted and went underground to worship.
Oh,
so the amber-colored stained glass represents the color of dirt and dust to give you the feeling that you're underground. Wow. And the stations of the cross on each side of this chapel are also made of the same materials as the bas relief. It's Carrara marble and Venetian glass. And in each station, there are little wooden crosses. Those crosses are made of olive wood from the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem.
Really?
Isn't that neat?
Can we get up close to it?
Sure. The one in this station is in the upper left corner in the colored glass.
I'm just amazed by the detail. All the little pieces, it's really beautiful. To be honest, I wasn't really sure what the outside of this building had to do with faith or religion. It looks very ominous to me. It looks kind of warlike. And then I went inside and I saw the level of detail devoted to flight and spirituality, and I was blown away.
As we made our Artland pilgrimage to the shrines of American architecture, it wasn't only the marvels of the last century that we sought out. In Boston, I visited another extraordinary place of worship, Trinity Church. Designed by Henry Hobson Richardson and built between 1872 and 1877, the building caused a sensation when it was opened to the public.
What was so innovative about this building that meant it had such an effect on the architectural establishment?
First, it was Richardson's masterpiece. This is what established his career. And Richardson, of his generation, was the first celebrity architect, the Frank Gehry or Daniel Libeskind of his day. The other reason is this building jump-started or established the Richardsonian Romanesque, a new style of architecture in America that was so popular for a time, it was simply known as the American style.
So this was a turning point when America stopped being so Eurocentric and started defining itself by its own creativity or its own art styles.
Exactly. The Richardsonian Romanesque was the first American architectural style to be imitated by Europeans. What he did that was new for America and new for Europe is he took the style and he really made it his own. he simplified it. He made it more expressive. So he took the round-headed arch and he enlarged it and enlarged the openings for stained glass so that these buildings could highlight this new American form. So he took it, simplified it, made it bolder, fresher, American. This was the first time in America where art and architecture were designed as a unified whole and executed by American artists and an American architect.
Who were the artists that worked inside the church?
The primary artist was John Lafarge. His goal was to elevate mural painting to a fine art. And in order to do that, he used artists instead of artisans. Unlike a typical American church, gray stone interior, whitewashed interior, very simple, you'd walk into Trinity and it was envisioned to be an experience as if you're walking into a painting. Every surface was decorated and planned that way by this partnership of clergy, artist, and architect.
Immediately next door is the elegant John Hancock Tower by master modernist I.M. Pei. It's designed quite literally to reflect the beauty of Trinity Church.
This for me is such a quintessentially American view. The corporate tower and the lovely jewel-like church. Nowhere else in the world would these two buildings come together so closely and complement each other so well.
Traveling 10,000 miles in 8 weeks can begin to warp your sense of where you are, especially on some of the longer legs of the drive, like the day we drove from Minneapolis-St. Paul to St. Louis.
I forgot Wisconsin. That's really bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I forgot a whole state.
Yeah, it's a whole state.
Well, we didn't really,
If you like cheese.
I didn't engage in Wisconsin very much.
You probably didn't even get out of the vehicle.
But I did. I took a pee in a hedge.
Now people look at it. You took a pee in a hedge.
Yeah.
You like doing that.
It's a long slog, but it's worth it. We arrived to see the Gateway Arch just before the sun sets over the Mississippi. Charlie tells me that its design is based on the hyperbolic cosine function. Thanks, Charlie. We order him a table for one on the other side of town. I last visited the arch as a child, but find it every bit as impressive as I did then. 630 feet high, the arch is the world's tallest monument. I'm tantalizingly close, but it's not until tomorrow that I'll get to see the arch up close and personal. St. Louis, early morning. A perfect day to enjoy the arch's striking profile. But I'm interested in more than just spectacle. I want to know the story behind the arch's construction. I'm here to meet engineer Woody Zenfeld, who's going to tell me what this metal bow is all about. Once the arch was completed, what did people think of it?
Oh, people have been waiting so long in St. Louis to see the arch. They were excited about having it, and they would come down, and we built a platform for people to observe the construction because they called it the biggest free show in town. And in fact, those of us who had something to do with the arch were treated almost like minor celebrities, you know, because of the uniqueness of the work that we were doing.
I can understand why Woody and company became such local heroes. The arch is an engineering marvel. Designed by the architect Eero Saarinen to commemorate the pioneers of the West, the arch's sweeping curves took just 2 years to build. So ambitious was this project that insurance companies predicted that 13 people would be killed during its construction. In fact, no one died. The arch was built in triangular sections of stainless steel. These were lifted into place by specially designed creeper derricks which would climb up each side of the arch on vertical tracks. As it neared completion, there remained one vital question.
Was there a moment when you thought maybe the legs wouldn't meet?
Well, we were confident, but we were never sure because it had never been done before. But we came in for a lot of kidding by people who were jokingly said that it wasn't going to meet at the top. I'd be walking on the street and people would blow their horn and go like this, saying, "Hey, Woody, meaning that it wasn't going to meet at the top. But we knew it was going to meet at the top.
Of course it did, one day in October 1965. Since then, nobody has attempted to build an arch of comparable size and scope. Now, after talking with Woody, I'm not sure they ever will.
It's been a long time since I was here, but the one thing I remember was standing with my back to the arch and the view when you look up and all the way around.
Eero Saarinen, who designed the Gateway Arch, wasn't the only architect in the family. His dad, Eliel, taught architecture at a Midwestern college, and in 1940 he was commissioned to create this church in Columbus, Indiana. And the church was the first of a remarkable series of buildings in this otherwise unremarkable small town. Over the past 60 years, the people of Columbus have invited many of the world's masters of architectural modernism to design their public buildings. For example, this Lutheran church is a design by Gunnar Birkitz. And over there, just behind Henry Moore's arch, is the town's library by I.M. Pei. Remember the glass pyramid outside the Louvre in Paris? He did that too. An imaginative local foundation pays for the employment of these legendary figures. The town thrives aesthetically and also economically through tourism. The lives of local people are enriched by a better environment. And civic monuments, often flatly functional in other towns, instead become examples of truly exceptional design. Like this war memorial by Thompson and Rose Architects.
It's an incredibly moving piece of work. On the outside, you have the names of all of the soldiers that were killed, and then on these columns on the inside, you have excerpts from citations, from letters home, from postcards out to the troops. You walk around, June 1944, dear Mum and Dad, it's about the middle of June, and by the time you receive this letter, I will have been in action. He was killed in the Pacific in July, just a month later, 1944. It's really interesting because people think of modernist design as being so impersonal, and yet you come into something like this and it kind of hits you so much harder than great big classical statues that don't mean anything. This is really about people. I think that's what's amazing about this town, is it's modern design working for people. And it really can do if it's done well. This is extraordinary.
With its striking monuments and elegant public buildings, Columbus, Indiana really does feel like a very humane environment. But if you were to ask me to show you the most modern place to live in the entire United States, I'd probably take you somewhere that we visited just outside the Windy City. Just outside Chicago is a house that is one of the real high points of modernism. But what is modernism? Well, it's quite a hard question to answer because it wasn't a movement as such. It was a loose collection of ideals and styles that rejected history and ornamentation and instead focused on function, science and technology in a belief that that could improve society and our daily lives. And this house sums up all of those ideas beautifully. Built in 1951, the Farnsworth House was simply way ahead of its time. Designed by Mies van der Rohe for Dr. Edith Farnsworth, the building was a difficult and sometimes adversarial collaboration between a driven client and an unyielding architect. Built 5 foot above the floodplain, the house has come to be seen as the pinnacle of modernism. It's a building that I thought I might only ever see in books, so I'm delighted to be here. Now, what Mies van der Rohe wanted to do was to strip the house down to its absolute bare essentials. So there's no decoration, there's no plant pots, there's no welcome home doormat, but what there is the essentials. There's a roof and a floor. But look at the way these are designed. There's such clarity and simplicity. I absolutely love this house. And once you get inside, there's the same rigorous approach and simplicity. So there's somewhere to work, there's somewhere to eat, and just remember, all of this furniture was designed by van der Rohe as well. And somewhere to cook. I really can't believe this beautiful kitchen is 50 years old. There's somewhere to sleep, and of course, if you live in a house with all glass walls, you need some drapes or curtains to keep out the light and to create some privacy. And when you're paring down the house to the absolute bare essentials, you still need a bathroom. And finally, there's the sitting room where you can sit down and relax and get warm around a fire. I suppose the key feature of this space, and in fact the whole house, are these giant glass walls that just disappear. And it's that contrast between the stillness and tranquility of the inside and the ever-changing beauty of the woodland that surrounds it that makes this house so special to be in. It's like being surrounded by an ever-changing, most beautiful wallpaper you can imagine. For all its plus points, I do have one problem with the Farnsworth house in that it's so totally designed that there's very little room for the person staying or living in here to express themselves. I mean, where are you going to put that photo or that thing you brought back from holiday? It just really wouldn't look right. This is Mies's space, and he's not going to let you forget it. But if you put that to one side and think of this place as much as being a sculpture as it is a place to live, then really there are very few houses on the planet that surpass it. So what do you guys reckon to fill this puppy up? 50 bucks? 100 bucks? Keep it coming, 150, keep it coming, 200, 250 bucks every time. We're going through that in about a day and a half. It's hardcore. Well, that's the price of driving across the States in an RV to see some of the country's greatest architecture. But great seems almost too small a word for our next destination. Not that it proved the easiest place to get to. Trust me, these single-lane dirt tracks were made for 35-foot long, 13-foot high RVs. We're lost again, but our spirits are high as we're on our way to an architectural jewel, and we soon make our way out of the mist. I've come to rural Pennsylvania to visit one of the most recognizable houses on the entire planet. The Kaufman House, or Falling Water as it's better known, by Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, it's a really fascinating building because while it's so iconic,
I think very few people know what it's like inside, or actually how it works as a building, as a home, and I certainly don't. So I'm looking forward to finding out. Well, Mr. Lloyd Wright, let the lesson begin.
Falling Water was built as a weekend retreat for Edgar Kaufman, a department store owner from Pittsburgh. Designed in 1935, it was constructed from stone quarried from the site itself. And 70 years on, it's probably fair to say that Frank Lloyd Wright's creation is the most famous modern house in the world.
Wow. That's incredible. This wall is really low. This balustrade is coming just over my knee. And it's got to be a good 10, 12 meters down to the bottom of the waterfall. So while it looks very dramatic from the picture postcard from down by the waterfall, you have no idea of how vertiginous and kind of dangerous it feels to be up here. It's exhilarating, incredibly exhilarating.
I'm off to meet Sarah Cleary. She's worked here for 16 years, so she should be able to tell me a thing or two that the books won't.
Was it a very expensive building to build?
Well, it didn't start out that way. Wright was given a budget of between $20,000 and $30,000 for this house. And to put that into context, at the time you could purchase a 4-bedroom brick home in Pittsburgh for about $5,000.
Right, so a significant amount of money.
Yeah, well, but it didn't end up that way. The house ended up at $155,000.
Wow. How did the Kaufmans actually receive the idea of the building being sat almost right on top of the waterfall?
The Kaufmans knew they were getting a house closer to the waterfall, but never in their wildest dreams thought they were going to get a house over a waterfall. They thought it'd be somewhere nearby.
You're probably just as intrigued as I am to see inside. And yep, as you might expect, Frank Lloyd Wright even designed most of the furniture and fittings. Simply incredible.
I'd just like to show you something here in Mr. Kaufman's his dressing room. This window is full height, and as it opens, it swings through this beautiful cutout in the desk. Now, if I'd been doing this, I would have thought, right, break the window here and have an opening panel above and a bit below, but Frank Lloyd Wright just says, no, just describe this arc into the surface. It's beautiful. It's a lovely little solution. How did the Kaufmans respond to the house when it was finished?
Oh, they loved it. There's a really nice letter from Lillian from, I guess it was around Christmas time in 1938, where she writes a letter to Frank Lloyd Wright thanking him for putting this joy into their lives. She often commented that Wright's architecture was her life education.
It strikes me as being a very humane house, a very comfortable house to be in, that really understands the way people live. Do you think that's one of its main strengths?
Well, I think that's Frank Lloyd Wright's biggest strengths. I mean, I think that's why, among the modernists, there's no more sensual design than with Wright. I mean, this place is about touching. This place is about knowing where the sun is at any part of day. It's about smelling burned wood in the fireplace and hearing the waterfall. It's a specific kind of experience that's tied to this Bear Run landscape, and that's what Wright was all about. He was pursuing a very individualistic architecture. You know, you hire an architect to do a building, and there's a lot of really good buildings, but a really great architect knows more about you than you do. And I think that's what happened here. Wright produced an environment for the Kaufmans that they never could have visualized or communicated to them. That's why you hire architects.
I've been looking forward to visiting this house probably more than anything else on this entire trip. I came here expecting to have a lesson to learn, but actually it's been more than that. I've been humbled by the incredible creativity of Frank Lloyd Wright, the ideas that have poured out of his mind onto paper and then into this building. In many ways, it's just so incredibly brave. I mean, just think of it, coming to this valley before the Second World War in the 1930s and going, you know what? I'm going to stick the house on top of the waterfall. It's just such big thinking. I'm lost for words. But maybe it's because this is the perfect house.
Not as messy as usual, but definitely some garbage to be picked up. Here we are in the RV. Candy, empty bottles. Cameraman junk all over the place. Put it over here in one pile. Production junk. Producer reading the paper, hard at work as usual. Ah, your typical bachelor fridge. Look at that. Beef jerky, peanut butter, and mustard. Who lives like this? Who just has a Coke in the chair and then drops it behind? I think it's the cameraman. That's from South Africa. It's a different standard of living, I think. So that's it. That's the RV. You guys are annoying me. I'm leaving.
There were times on the trip when we were all glad to get away from the RV. Like the day just north of Phoenix when I swapped vehicles to visit a man who had actually studied under Frank Lloyd Wright.
I've had to get out of the Artland RV and into this SUV to come and see a project called Arco down this dirt road. Now, I don't know a lot about it. It's a group of eco buildings out in the desert. So this, for me, is going to be a real voyage of discovery.
My first impression of Arco is a little mixed. The complex of buildings, which was started in 1970, isn't conventionally beautiful, and at times some of the design can perhaps be a little brutalist, but there is verve and individuality to the site, which I find intriguing. Apparently, the founding principle behind the design is an idea called arcology. This is defined as the fusion of architecture and ecology, hence arcology. But what does that really mean? The founder of Arco, Paolo Soleri, a one-time student of Frank Lloyd Wright and still working today at the age of 87, has kindly agreed to meet me and share his ideas.
Could you tell me what the ultimate vision is for Arco?
The core of the idea is that we are always trying to learn from nature and try to, in a way, apply the things that have been successful in nature. Our use of resources is minimal compared to the regular suburban sprawl, because we cut on water, we cut on energy, we cut on distance, we cut on instruments and facilities, we cut on automobiles. And the other thing is that we are trying in each building to build a flexibility so that you can develop something today and next year you might develop something else.
This drive to temper urban sprawl and thereby reduce the depletion of land and natural resources is an idea close to my heart. But theory done, how does Soleri envisage the actual design of his architectural utopia?
Looking at this model, you really get a sense of the scale of Soleri's vision. The stuff in grey is what exists today. That is Arco today. The stuff in white, that huge structure behind it, is what Soleri's proposing. That is a super dense town that houses 5,000 people. The scale of the vision is mind-blowing.
To say that there's a mountain to climb before Soleri's vision is realised would probably be to offer a disservice to mountains. But the design is exciting. There's a real charm to the place, and I find Arcosanti growing on me. I love the idea that cities should be pedestrian-centred rather than vehicle-centred, and I applaud a number of very beautiful touches.
There's lots of instances of real joy and humour in the design, like this structure, which is reminiscent of an Aztec temple or an abstract geological formation. But actually, it's for simply sitting back and contemplating the sky. Despite being up here in the high desert, we're about to get drenched. This enormous lightning and thunderstorm is approaching. There we go, you see that one? But from up here you get a really good idea of what Saleri's achieved. Over there is the main entrance building. These two domes are where they make the bells. Under here is all accommodation, administration. Over there is a music centre, and down there is where Saleri designs. Look, this storm is drawing a bit of a crowd. So, even though it's at this scale, quite large, this represents only 5% of what Saleri envisages here when it's finished. Beautiful. But I'm going to get out of here before I get absolutely drenched. The thing that really strikes me about this place is that it's a huge ongoing experiment. So you can see here this building isn't finished and probably won't be for many, many years. But when it is finished, there's going to be this huge canopy structure over here. The other thing is you very clearly see the principles by which Saleri is designing Arcosanti. Basically, it's all about a very dense city. So here you have the main exhibition space, the main performance space. And right next to it, you've got people living and people working. The whole idea is you get a lot of people to live in as small a space as possible, reducing the need to travel and reducing the impact on the planet.
Arcosanti is far from finished, and there's something slightly mournful about these arches and supports. They suggest more about what hasn't been built than what has. Quite how it would look with 5,000 people living in a semi-dome round the back, I just don't know. Also, there's no arguing that this experiment relies completely on Saleri, and what happens after he's gone? I'm not sure either. But what staggers me is how ahead of his time Saleri has been. 30 years ago, he was addressing issues which we are only just beginning to understand today. Ecological building and development is a really big future challenge for all of us, architects included. In the high desert, I went to a place called Cal Earth to meet a man who's trying to tackle this challenge head-on. Nadir Khalili is an architect committed to making low-cost, sustainable housing from the basic elements of earth, water, air, and fire. His vision is that his structures can help house some of the 100 million people on the planet who don't have a roof over their heads. It's at his Californian Institute of Earth Art and Architecture, Cal Earth, that he tests out his designs. Nadir, what are the ideas behind Cal Earth? What's it all about?
The idea behind Cal Earth started in 1976, where I used to be the high-rise specialist, skyscraper in America, in Iran, around the world. I even lecture about them. And one day I quit, bought a motorcycle and drove to deserts of Iran and villages for 5 years to explore how we can use Earth to create shelter for humanity.
Nadir experimented with setting adobe buildings on fire. This turned the mud walls into ceramic, making them much better at standing up to earthquakes and the elements.
In 1984, I was invited to present the first ideas on how to build a lunar colony for NASA's. And that's where I introduced two systems of building. One was ceramic houses, with setting them on fire. Second was, we called it Velcro adobe. It was just what you see here. It's all long tubes filled up with earth and coil or straight line with barbed wire between them to create a disaster-resistant building.
Could you show me how this system works? Can we see the stages of how a building goes up?
All right, we will show you. So
Can you
let's
show
go and show you.
How are the buildings actually made?
Well, you take this 1 kilometer long tube.
Like
and then- and like
fabric
this,
tube?
Fabric tubes, and then you cut it to the pieces that you like, 10 foot, 20 foot, and then you pack the soil into this tube, damp soil usually with a small percentage of cement, and then you tamp it, and then you lay it in, and then you put the barbed wire over it.
So you've got one layer, barbed wire, and then another layer would just sit right on top of that, and you'd kind of step it in.
Yes.
Does this stuff not rot?
Yes, they will be disintegrate in the sun, and that's what we want. So the tubes are really good for 6 months, but we need it for 3 days only.
Then the soil starts to go hard?
Soil, yes. So we do the structure, the foundation, the buildings, and then decoration and painting, everything with earth.
Here at Cal Earth, they've also developed this amazing mud ball surface treatment. You literally make a mud ball, add some cement, and kind of chuck it against the side of the building. Not only is it very beautiful, but it works environmentally. It breaks up the sun as it hits this face with sun and shadow, and each little ball stops the building heating up quickly and makes this wonderful texture. I have to admit that on the bus, on my way here, I was a bit sceptical about what I feared could be dodgy architecture mixed up with well-meaning worthiness. But as I talked with Nadir, I was increasingly impressed. So this is a finished house. It has a bedroom in there. Over here you have a little kitchen. Over here you've got a bathroom and a shower. The whole thing is cooled by a windscoop on the roof, and there's a lovely breeze coming through here. These houses are cheap to build, they're easy to build, they're sustainable, they're environmentally sound, and they make absolutely wonderful spaces to live in. With this system, for only $25,000, you can build a one-bedroom house. The point is, this puts beautiful, affordable, environmental housing within reach of just about everybody. And to me, that is simply the most extraordinary achievement. Cal Earth, I hope, has a place in the future of architecture. But on the Artland road trip, we also got a lightning tour around its recent past in Chicago. As we first saw when we arrived at twilight, Chicago has one of the greatest collections of the building associated more strongly than any other with America: skyscrapers. Chicago is probably best known for its skyline. In fact, this is where the skyscraper was born. When New York was still 4 or 5 stories, Chicago was already reaching for the skies. And surprisingly, the best way to see some of these phenomenal buildings is to get on a boat. Hi, morning.
Hi, morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great, Charlie. Hello.
I'm Simma.
Hello, hello. Wonderful, aren't they?
Oh, they're marvelous. It's all what Chicago is about.
That's what I've been
Great
told. That's what I've been
skyscrapers.
told. In the UK, we simply don't have skyscrapers of this size or number, so I find these buildings completely exhilarating. I wanted to find out why Chicago got so tall, so I've hooked up with architectural guide Simmer Dobson. She tells me that the story of the skyscraper begins with an 1871 catastrophe.
So all of this burnt down, the whole city?
Oh, yeah, well, none of this was here. So, yes, it burned down. The whole city burned. 17,450 structures, all made from wood, burned to the ground. And there you can see, that's Louis Sullivan's building, right next to the one that says Congress Hotel. Okay. And the tower at the time was the tallest building in Chicago, and people could pay a nickel to go upstairs.
Well, that little tower there was the biggest...
Well, the tower was the office. It was an office tower.
Wonderful. And when was it built?
1889, and it's a load-bearing building.
So it's stone, and the stone is taking the weight of the building.
Right.
The close concentration of the commercial district and the high price of land meant that the buildings had to grow vertically. It's created an outstanding vista, even if the weather isn't that perfect for boating.
Big storm. See, that was God, lightning from above, God telling you, no, it's not the Windy City. It is windy, of course, because we have tall buildings that make wind tunnels.
Yeah.
But the Windy City is not because, I know everybody calls it the Windy City. That's not the reason. In 1893, when we wanted the Columbian Exposition, we sent all of our politicians to Washington, D.C. to really, politically get these guys to give us the fair. And so when they got through, and they won, of course, all the politicians and everybody in the newspapers wrote up these big articles about, boy, those Chicago boys sure are windy.
Well, so it's not to do with the wind, it's not to do with the weather.
Nothing to do with the wind. There's other cities that are windier, but nothing to do with the weather.
The late 19th century buildings paved the way for subsequent skyscrapers. Proportion and engineering replaced fussy ornamentation, and the buildings started getting higher and higher.
So when was this one built?
1930s.
Okay.
And so the technology has changed.
Okay.
And now we have riveted steel.
Okay.
And we can go above 18 stories, okay?
So 18 stories was the limit when you were working with masonry.
Absolutely.
And then they introduced riveted steel and they shut up.
Yeah, and that's where we came up with the cage. That's where the Chicago School really took off. So if you were to take off all of the outer wall of this building, you would see the steel beams exactly the way the building looks. That's what we invented in Chicago.
The Depression and World War II halted the construction of these giants for 30 years. But after the skyscraper's re-emergence in the 1950s, they were more ambitious than ever.
Look at this is the daddy of modernism. This is the Sears Tower.
Oh God, that's so big.
Yeah.
How many stories is
110 stories, 1,450 feet tall.
When was it built?
1970s.
In the 1970s. Because that's a very modernist style, isn't
it? Absolutely. Pure international. But the building is more about the structure than the modernism.
Why is that?
Well, because it's made from what we call bundled tubes. There's really 9 tubes there that make up that building. So you have like 9 separate buildings. And Dr. Fosler Kahn, who was the structural engineer in here, came up with this bundled tube concept. It's like a paper towel tube. And if you stood it up alone, it won't stand. I mean, it will. You can blow it over easy. Take 9 of those tubes and bundle them together.
Stack them up like that?
No, bundle them together in a big pile.
Yeah.
Put a rubber band around them, and then start pulling them off to different levels. And they'll still stand.
So that's what defines that very iconic shape.
Absolutely.
Is a structural solution rather than a decorative one. Why do you think Chicago's built so many of these skyscrapers?
Well, because we can.
Because you got so much space out here. Why spend all the money building tall ones?
No. Well, we're the 3rd largest city in the United States, remember.
But you're not the tallest anymore, are they?
Well, as long as you're in North America, yeah, we are. We are still the tallest.
The sun comes out, and after saying goodbye to Seema, I head for the summit of our skyscraper tour, the Sears Tower. The view from the top offers the perfect place to reflect on these gargantuan buildings.
I still don't really understand why the skyscraper evolved here in Chicago when clearly there is so much space surrounding this city. But what I do know is that the skyscraper has come to dominate the 20th century in terms of buildings and has come to dominate just about every single city centre on the entire planet. And if you want to go somewhere and really see and understand the evolution of a building type, the evolution of the skyscraper, then Chicago's the place to come. This skyline and these buildings are truly a marvel.
You know, if Artland taught me one thing, it's that the best of America's architecture isn't just in the great cities like Chicago and Boston. It's generously dotted right across this land. Here in Artland, USA, there really are beautiful buildings from sea to shining sea.
This is Artland, USA.
A mammoth road trip crossing the United States, looking at the best of art and architecture.
So far, this lady's taken us 9,000 miles.
And in this show, we're starting in Boston and we're heading north.
In this show, I meet one of America's most influential artists, see some very good art, and marvel at some very bad art.
And I look at something ecclesiastical, something fantastical, and something that my mother warned me about.
It's the final week of our Pan-American road trip. From Boston, we head inland before making for the border, this time to Quebec. Finally, we kick for home and end our trip in magnificent Maine.